Guys, welcome back to Talking About Baseball. Today, we have some breaking news. Cody Bellinger has officially signed with my Chicago Cubs. This drastically changes their output for this season, in my opinion, and so I'm just going to talk about my thoughts on the deal. So, on that note, let's get into it. So the deal is not what Bellinger and Boris wanted coming into the offseason. He was given a 3-year deal worth $80 million, which I'm sure that the Cubs were the first to pounce on that once Bellinger was accepting short-term contracts. So for the 3 years and $80 million, he will be earning $30 million the first 2 years, also with opt-outs at the end of both of those years. And then in 2026, before he becomes a free agent, if he's still on the team, he will earn $20 million. Bellinger obviously had a great season last year, although it was slightly overrated, as you will see by some of the stats I'm going to show here. Cody Bellinger last year obviously had a great season. Looking at Baseball Reference, he was much better than his averages in his full career. He had a 4.4 WAR and was one of the best players on the Cubs. Unfortunately, they obviously did not make the playoffs, but he was one of the biggest reasons that they even had the chance to in the first place. And the Cubs will be getting a fully healthy season from him this year because he only had a 500 at-bats last year after an injury in late June. But like I said, he had a great season last year. He hit 300 with 26 home runs and 97 RBIs, along with stealing 20 stolen bases and having really nice defense at first base and center field with a 133 OPS plus. Overall, he just had a really good season last year. He was not an all-star as a lot of his production picked up after the all-star break, but he still finished 10th in MVP and won himself a Silver Slugger. So pretty much the gist of this deal for the Cubs is they're hoping that Cody Bellinger can return to his MVP form, and they're hoping that he's cool with just keeping $30 million for those years because honestly, they probably don't want him to do better than what he did last year because then he will opt out of his deal. But he is getting paid $30 million, and he's gonna opt out to find a long-term deal if he has a great season again. And that's pretty much the worry for this deal is that we really probably won't have him for all of those 3 years. But then again, if he opts out, I think there's a very good chance he comes back to Chicago on a long-term deal, despite the fact that his agent will still be Scott Boras. I think that he will want to stay in Chicago. We are the team that rebuilt his career, and honestly, without us, he would not be the player he is right now. He had some great years with the Dodgers, obviously, but there's a reason he's not there anymore, and that's because he completely fell apart. And I think that Bellinger, coming off of such a great season with the Cubs, I don't know why he wouldn't want to stay, and he did want to stay. So I think this is a great signing for both sides, and I'm hoping that Bellinger does stay for those 3 years. But also, there is, of course, going to be some concerns with this deal. We are paying Cody Bellinger a lot of money, and according to the more in-depth stats from Baseball Savant, he really was not that great of a player last year. Obviously, he produced a lot for the Cubs, and he was easily their best hitter. But if you look at it a little bit deeper, it's not quite as great. His expected WOBA was much lower than his actual WOBA. His expecting batting average was a 268. His actual batting average was a 307. His expected slugging percentage was a 434, while his actual slugging percentage was almost 100 points higher than that at a 525. Average exit velocity, barrel percentage, and hard hit percentage are all very low, although he does hit the ball in the sweet spot very well despite the fact he doesn't barrel it up that often. But his chase rate is also not that good, but his whiff and K rate is good, and his walk percentage isn't really all that great either. But other than that, he is pretty solid, and I think that the move to first base won't really hurt him because it's not like he has a crazy arm, just really solid outfield defense in general. I think that, once again, Bellinger's just a great ad for the Cubs. I think it's tough to, honestly, at this point, see where he fits in because a lot of the guys that we have gotten kind of fit in perfectly now. And so I think that our lineup is fully built. We don't need to get anyone else anymore. And I think that Michael Busch will probably move from the everyday first base role to playing more DH because he really doesn't have a spot then. So now for the next part of this video, we're going to be talking about how Bellinger fits in with the Cubs now that they've already started spring training and a lot of the positions are already pretty much set. So we're going to talk about how Bellinger works into that Cubs lineup as, of course, he will be playing as much as possible with the caliber player he is. So Obviously, we've made a lot of additions this offseason to try to build back what we lost from Cody Bellinger. And it wasn't looking super hopeful we would bring him back, but obviously this morning we just did. So I think that Bellinger, once again, is a very important player, but there wasn't really any gaping holes in this lineup outside of DH, and that's not where Cody's going to be playing. So pretty much how the lineup is going to look against right-handed pitchers, you're going to have Happen left, Seiya in right, Swanson at short, Horner at second, and at catcher, Yan Gomes. None of that's going to change. It's the same thing against lefties. But against righties in center, you're going to have PCA starting, depending on how his spring training goes. I would be pretty surprised if he doesn't start in the majors, but also based on this Bellinger signing, maybe he does. I think it would make more sense to just have him on the roster. And I think with this signing, I think Mike Tauchman should be the odd man out. He is another backup outfielder, and maybe we just carry 5 outfielders. But then again, if we do carry those 5 outfielders, that means we have to get rid of either Nick Madrigal or Patrick Wisdom. And personally, I would be pretty okay with getting rid of Patrick Wisdom. So then, of course, PCA, just like Bellinger, is also a left-handed hitter. So against the lefty pitcher, Bellinger will be out there starting in left field because he's going to be an everyday player with how much money we're paying him and the caliber of player he is in general. So he's obviously going to be playing every day. So against lefties, it will be him in center field. For first base and third base, originally it was going to be Michael Busch and Christopher Morel. For third base, at this point, I think Morel is probably the everyday starter. Maybe you give Nick Madrigal the starts against lefties because Morel's not great against lefties. I could see that, but Morel is your main starting third baseman according to Craig Counsell. And at first base, it was looking like it was going to be Michael Busch all the way. And then against lefties, you would give the at-bats to Patrick Wisdom. But now, honestly, I think Patrick Wisdom is out of the equation. He probably will be traded or gotten rid of or sent down because we do not have room on a roster for him anymore. So with Cody Bellinger, he will be playing first base against the right-handed pitcher, which against left-handers, our first baseman right now is a little bit up in the air with if we get rid of Wisdom, which is where all of this just makes it really difficult. But I think that I would be pretty okay with having Michael Busch play third against I would be pretty okay with Michael Busch playing first against lefties and just make him an everyday starter, along with him playing DH for us this year. Because against righties, he's our DH. Against lefties, it depends on how we build it with Madrigal, third base DH. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces. Against righties, I think we have a pretty set-in-stone lineup. Against lefties, I think it's going to fluctuate a lot this season. But the Cubs, obviously, now are very much better than they were last year. Shota Imanaga is a great replacement for Marcus Stroman, and I bet you that Cody Bellinger will do even better. Final thing we're going to look at for Bellinger is going on Fangraphs and looking at his projected value and his value last year. So last season on here, it still says he's not with the team. But last season, obviously, with the Cubs, he was great, and he's projected to do much worse than he did do last season. He's expected to have just about half the WAR he did last year, which I personally do not think will happen. And I don't know, the opt-outs, I don't know for sure what it is yet because I don't really know if the opt-outs are just for him or if they're also team opt-outs. I'm not totally sure what the deal is there. But Cody Bellinger last year gave the Cubs about $22 million value for a $17.5 million contract. And here, most places are projecting him to give the Cubs about $3 million value. The highest one is bringing him up to about $9 million. And so we're paying him $30 million to do potentially almost zero value according to some of these because they'll think he'll do so bad defensively. He is a great defensive first baseman, and that's where I think the defensive metrics will kind of help him because center field, he's not the best, but he is pretty solid, and at first base, he's also not the best, but once again, pretty solid. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Breaking news, Cody Bellinger has signed with the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs will be winning the NL Central this year, 100%, and we'll see if they can make a deep run in the playoffs. I'm feeling 2022 Phillies with this team, just a breakout year. Obviously, we're not quite as good as that team. We don't have a Bryce Harper or a Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola, but I'm hoping we can make it as far as they did, but maybe win the World Series. Highly doubt we win the World Series because the Dodgers exist, but we'll see how it goes. And I will see you next time on Talk About Baseball, which might even be later today. Bye.